Hello guys, welcome. So in this video I'm going to make a breakdown of this scene and basically show you how I put everything together and how I usually my process of creating my scenes. And so the way I got this right here is uh, I basically no, yeah, I used Blender's native uh, landscape tool. This is, you can enable it in the preferences, add-ons, and this anti-landscape. So the way I got that is, I think I even used this default one, or I cycled through the random seed, and I went down here and lowered the maximum to like 0.3 or something, which gave me this flat surface on the top. Also increase the subdivisions, and when you're happy with your landscape, you go into here in this N menu under create and under landscape tools, weight from slope. This gives us this weight paint based off the direction of the normals, which later on we can use for scattering the grass. So now scale it up, and do not forget to apply the scale, because it's gonna mess up the scattering later on if you do not do that. So yeah, that's basically it. I took a piece of landscape and instanced it around with Alt D until I got something cool looking, and placed water in here. And also let me show you, think of it like this. This is basically one material and this is another, and I mix them together with this setup. So I have both of them going into the shader, in the mix shader node, and I used this setup to kind of separate the direction of the mesh. So the mesh facing upwards has material 1, and the black is the material 2. I use that for the alpha on or factor. So yeah, that's basically what I did for my foundation. I thought camera would be really nice somewhere here. And the next thing I did was I took my main subject and I placed it right here. I thought it would be a really nice place to uh, a really nice place to place something like this Japanese pagoda. I like to, when I'm creating my scenes, I like to have all my models already done and just drag them into the scene, because I find that if you are modeling while you are creating the scene, it really slows down your progress and you tend to lose patience and motivation. You forget what your idea even was. So yeah, I really think having your models ready is a really good idea. Also, I started with this lighting, just flat, kind of white or even grayish surrounding. I'll talk about lighting later on. Um, so the next thing I did was I started dragging more and more of those models into my scene, and I placed them around. They were kind of not randomly, but I was looking at this camera rendering view while I was doing that, and I just kind of placed them around how I thought it would look really nice. I'd like to mention, so for example here, this bridge, it's not connected to anything because it is out of the frame all the time. And so it's not really important at all to have anything here. It's just gonna make rendering slower if your scene has more stuff in it. And It's really not important when it's not visible. Here you can see how this house is not really even on the surface of the landscape, but it's you cannot see that from anywhere, even here, or you actually kind of can, but that's hidden with trees later on. So yeah, you just have to make it look right from the camera angle, and that's all that matters really. So at this point, I started bringing in some trees into the scene, and here everything I said still applies, which is basically just place them around however you like. Um, I tried to place them mostly behind the buildings, so, because I did not really want to hide them, but you can see somewhere I decided to put them in front because I wanted to break the pattern that I have right here, and everything you see there is all the same house models. All those trees they're kind of placed everything randomly however I like, but this one was I thought about this one for slightly longer, this one, because it takes a lot in the frame. It's really important to get it right then. So what I did with it is I rotated it around quite a lot and moved around until I got this angle on it. And what I like about this one, about that angle, is if you imagine the silhouette of the tree, you can see how it points towards the top of the pagoda, and it kind of creates a leading line in the frame which draws your attention towards this part or the main pagoda in the center. At this point, I even had my lighting figured out, so let me enable this LCA collection. You see in the background I added some image textures for the sky, and I added fog. For the fog, I usually use volume scatter with anisotropy, if that's how you pronounce it, turned up quite a bit. I even sometimes turned up to like 0.95 or so, and density real low. Yeah, and here you can see this cube, which is more, which kind of makes this darker. You can see. Uh, yeah, it kind of just cuts the light that is coming from the back, so it looks more like it's a dense forest rather than nothing behind the camera. So yeah, and here is the main lighting. You can see here that I used two sky textures and I mixed them together. I actually do that quite often in my scenes. I'll explain in a bit why. So, but let me just explain you the main sky texture or the lighting. So what I did here is I placed the rotation to come, the light to come from the side, which almost always looks nice. You cannot really go wrong with having the lighting go from the side. Uh, I also changed this part. So the reason you change that is you bring the altitude up to like some thousands and air down. And what that does is makes the shadows slightly more bluish rather than straight up just darker. And the reason I do that is because it kind of gives those anime vibes, you know. It kind of makes it look more like a fantasy a world. Now let me show you why I had those two mixed together. So the only difference between them is the rotation, which is just slightly different, like 6 degrees. So you can see how in this one, for example, I have some light highlight here, but I do not really have it here. So I rotated the sun just slightly, so I have more of that highlight here. And but there I had less of those highlights, so I mixed those two together to have both of them. But you have to be really careful with this approach for one specific reason. So let me just create a cube so I can explain to you nicer. So if you have some non-organic shapes like this straight line, for example, it will you will see really clearly that it casts two shadows, which looks very unnatural and it can completely break your lighting if you're not careful. But if you have like really organic shapes like leaves and the whole scene is actually, yeah, really organic, you can use that approach to kind of cheat in some light where you want. So yeah, that's basically everything for the lighting that I do. Yeah, the next thing I did was I brought some more trees in the background because I thought the scene really looked flat. There was no background at all. And what I did for those is I scaled them up like 3 times or so. That's something I really like to do in my scenes. You will see if you if you try. Just scale up the tree a few times and you'll see how cool that looks. Like it just looks so amazing when you have some big trees. So yeah, definitely definitely try that. Um, yeah. Um, and the next thing I did was not actually bushes, but not even the cliff. I think at this point I started scattering around the grass. This, which adds a lot of realism to the scene. So let me now break that down. That's, I think, really important part. I'll take this one, for example. So I duplicate the landscape and go into edit mode. And with, how it's called, with transparency in display, with X-ray, I select everything that's underwater and I delete it. And also I would delete everything that's outside of the camera. Let's say this is outside the camera, even though it's clearly not. That's in the camera, this outside. But yeah, let's say I want to scatter grass here. That's basically how I make my selections, with literally deleting the geometry where I do not want the grass. So the way I do my scattering is I go into geometry nodes, and yeah, this is my setup for grass right here. Yeah, so the thing I do is I make a collection for scattering, and I have this scatter objects collection. And here you have to make like you make a collection with the grass models you want to scatter around. For example, I use those. Uh, you can get a lot of nice uh, plants and grass models from there's a free pack on Blender Market. I'll leave the link in the description. So I use those, just place it in a collection somewhere, uh, in its own dedicated collection, and you bring it like here in the setup. So let me explain to you what every node here did. So here is our geometry output, which is basically this. And I use the distribute points and faces to get like those points everywhere. Here I like to use this wasn't disk, if that's how it's pronounced, just so I can increase this minimum distance, so they are not too close together. And here there is also this density factor with attribute slope. This is that weight paint that we created on the beginning of the video, and which what that kind of helps with is you can you can see how you can uh, like this black slider. You know, you remember how there was uh, a lot of weight here on the flat surface, and on the side there was not so much weight. So if we disable that, for example, you can see how there's more now those points on the side, but I just plugged it in, so there's less of them. Yeah, the next thing from this distribute points of faces, you connect it to this instance of points node. And also I like to plug the normal into rotation. So the grass on the side takes the rotation of the normal. You can see how it's always facing upwards if you do not connect that. And also I take a random value from like 0.8 to 1.2 and plug it into scale, so not all the instances are the same size. And yeah, this object info, that's the scatter object, that's the collection where you put your grass models in. And here I have some rotate instances node, which kind of rotates every single instance around its own local z axis. And yeah, that's basically it for the grass. But let me show you how I also scattered those rocks. So what I did here is I inverted this slope mask. You can see it's really lagging now because there's a lot of them scattered on the top, but they're getting moved downwards. But yeah, later on that. Uh, what I did here with this slope, weight paint, yeah, and color ramp is I inverted it. So now when there was a lot of weight is now no weight, and where there was little weight is now all the weight. So yeah, that's what I did with this color ramp. And it's basically the same setup as before. This is scatter objects 2 collection where I have my rock models, same rotation into normal into rotation, random scale, and random z value, so they are more random. And here I just had set position to minus 0.5 meters. And yeah, that's what I did for every single part of the landscape. Yeah, so at this point I really thought the scene was finished, but it still lacked some depth. And then I looked at some other renders from some other people, like Sweeper, for example, and I noticed he really often has some mountain in the background. So here these clips comes in. Yeah, I made that clip in the background, and I really like that detail. And you can see how I made it go downwards towards the middle, which is the same story as this tree. You can see if you imagine it as a silhouette, you can see how those leading lines are leading towards this middle pagoda, which I wanted to be the main, the center of the viewer's attention. Um, and also here is some final bushes, which are just some more detail everywhere, scattered around. And for the final touch, I made those leaves fall downwards. This is a slightly more complicated, but still really simple setup. So what I did here is I took a cube, like just a regular cube like this one, and I took this mesh to volume node and distribute points in volume, which basically gave me a lot of points in the cube. And here, that's connected to this instance on points. The same story, the dedicated collection with leaf models connected to instance, random, scale. Here there is nothing connected to the rotation, but still I had random rotation plugged here, but I animated it with the frame driver, so it's the leaves are constantly rotating slowly while the animation is playing. So what's also important is this set position with random value, because I wanted every instance of those leaves to go downwards with random speed. So yeah, this is for the x-axis, which makes it go sideways slightly, and this is for the z-axis, which makes it go downwards. You can see this is driver I used, hashtag frame times minus 0.5, and yeah, just the bake node, which makes it slightly less laggier. But yeah, okay, yeah, so that's basically all the steps I took to finish this scene. Animated the camera slightly to go on this path. So if you have any more questions, feel free to ask me in the comments. I hope you learn something new from this, that you can apply to your own scenes. And yeah, see you in the next video. Bye.